call me dirt, you'll get smacked in the bleak Nero. Go on, you go home. Get your hair cut. Go on, sure, get home. Get your hair cut.
Well, the Richards are very powerful because the Richardsons, if they had anything, they had money. And money in itself is power.
He was doing no different to what any banker is doing in the city, but he come from the wrong side of the fence.
The villain's only weapon is pain. Pain is their only option.
You do not build an empire of scrap metal yards like Charlie did, you know, without throwing a nice few right-handers here and there.
They're famously known as the South London rivals to the East End Kray twins. According to legend, the feud came to a head with the shooting of Richardson associate George Cornell by Ronnie Kray.
The Craze brought glamour to the gangster business. Their name has become a brand name for gangster chic. But while the Craze basked in publicity, another gang, better organized and far more powerful, spread its violent influence away from the flashbulbs. The underworld knew them as the Richardson Gang, or simply the torture mob. They carved a terrifying reputation out of the bodies of their victims.
Scruffy little firm, the Craze. Very powerful, Richardsons. And you didn't mess about her. Otherwise, you came out of there a cripple. If you were still alive at all. Naughty boys, they were naughty boys.
July the 30th, 1966, a day this country has never forgotten. The game started badly for our football heroes, but not as badly as that very same day started for the Richardson Gang.
The Ramsey spirit, believing that with sustained attack the goals must come.
For over a year, Alf Ramsey's men had trained for this heady day. All that time, police officers had been secretly investigating London's most powerful gang. At dawn, on World Cup final day, 70 officers raided homes across the southeast. They seized the gang leader, Charlie Richardson, in bed. There was no controversy about the police's achievement. That famous day, the power of the Richardsons was broken. 11 of the gang were charged.
You had the Craze North London, Richardsons South London, but I think the Richardsons were far more violent than the Craze. The Craze would cause damage and perhaps beat up somebody or burn their shops down or their workshops, but the Richardsons they were frighteners, really vicious people.
As the Craze lieutenant, Albert Donahue was a hard man, a dangerous man. But even he was wary when entering the Richardson South London manor.
They had all the top hard men from South London. All the dangerous people were working for the Richardsons. Yeah.
Why did they need people like that?
It was, to instill fear. Indian country, we called it. South London. Like going amongst the Cherokees.
Why, Charlie, why after all these years have you decided to tell your story?
Well, I think that we owe it to the family, really, to put our side of the story. If you can do it properly, we want to do it. You know, it's an interesting story. The truth is much better than all the mythology.
Like they talk about the Richardson Gang.
Oh, it's crazy. In my gang, I had 5 kids indoors.
So there was no gang?
No gang. Why do we want a gang? Silly.
Charlie and Eddie, leaders of what later became known as the Richardson Gang, grew up in Camberwell, South London. Charlie was born in 1934, followed by younger siblings Eddie, Alan and Elaine. Much of their childhood was spent during the Second World War.
What about when you were young, though? Were you a bit of a handful?
No, I don't think so. Not they're just ordinary kids. Well, you've got to remember all bombing was going on when I was a kid. You know, school, we only went here and there because the schools were shut over the bombing.
With school interrupted by the war, 11-year-old Charlie and 9-year-old Eddie spent their free time developing techniques to beat the rations.
We should put away at the traffic lights, jump on the rubber and change the lights. Time the lorry come out, the lights would be red, we'd climb on the back. Steal the apples, put them down your jumper.
At just 14 years of age, Charlie had become a dab hand at stealing cars for nights out and special occasions until, in 1949, he was caught in the act. He was sent to Lambeth Juvenile Court and sentenced to 3 years in a correctional facility for boys. Less than a year later, with the help of his father, he busted out.
Charlie was caught and taken to Wormwood Scrubs as punishment, followed by another reform school. On his release, he worked for his uncle Jim, buying used farm sacks from all over the UK. This gave 16-year-old Charlie an idea.
And I thought I'd do this on my own, you understand? And I got the little warehouse and took it over. My mum come and work for me as a cashier. And that's what we've done, you know, for scrap metals.
Charlie's scrap metal empire was born.
Another famous South London gangster and for a time member of the Richardson Gang was Mad Frankie Fraser. Frankie, who of course became associated with the use of pliers for his own particular specialised form of dentistry, although, to be fair, I've yet to meet anyone who actually witnessed that. Frank's invited me to join him for a drink at his local, the Hollydale Tavern. Look back on South London for me in the wartime. What was that like?
Oh, wonderful. I'll never forgive Hitler for surrendering.
Why?
Well, everything was rationed, and you could get whatever you wanted and sell it on and all over the country and everything. Of course, once the war was over, a lot of them things that were rationed wasn't then. And things were evening out in a bit, yeah. They were wonderful days of war.
Charlie made the most of the post-war years, and the scrap metal business was becoming successful. Charlie and younger brother Eddie were developing a name for themselves.
I'd just come out of prison, and my sister told me what terrific guys they were. She knew the Richardsons through her husband, and that's how I come to meet them. And I liked them very much, yeah.
But the government got in the way of Charlie's developing business. In 1953, he was conscripted to the army.
By the time I come 18, I didn't want to go in the army because I was earning money, you understand, with the scrap business. You know, having a good time. I didn't want to be about in the army £1 a week, did I, you know? And I thought I've got to get out of this somehow.
So what did you do?
Well, trying to make out I was mad and different things, you know. In the end, they gave me 6 months and slung me out.
Charlie was court-martialed and sent to the military prison at Shepton Mallet for 6 months. Here he met the Kray twins for the first time. Little did he know that they would later be thought of as his infamous rivals from the East End.
I'm going to meet a man I've known for many years, a man whose reputation precedes him.
He's one of the only Englishmen accepted into the American mafia families.
He helped me to write the Craze biography and always gives me a wise perspective on events. He's Wilf Pine, always known as one of the chaps and close friend of the Kray twins, and Charlie Richardson.
South London, East London, in terms of crime, what's the difference?
Ah, right, that's a good one. South London, they were the brains. Train robbery, All South London villains done that. They were absolute masters at doing what they'd done, you know. The East End at that period of time was more about giving you a good right-hander, you know. With them it was muscle, 9 times out of 10 it was robbery with violence. That is the difference between the two.
Charlie was released from Shepton Mallet Glasshouse. His first order of business to buy another scrapyard here in Addington Square. Despite being sent to correctional school and being banged up in Wormwood Scrubs and Army Prison, the Richardson empire continued to grow. The strong arm of the law, it seemed, wasn't strong enough.
Straight out of the army, you know, and started again, built it up.
And you were very successful?
Yeah, successful with it. It's just something in us, really, Fred, you know. Intuition, isn't it, really?
Be honest with me, Charlie. Was there any criminal activity at that time?
Well, I suppose there was. If anybody had anything they'd asked us, we thought we could earn £1 out of it, we would buy it crooked, you understand? I never asked too many questions about it, did you? Otherwise people wouldn't come here, they'd go somewhere else.
Anybody with any sense knows you don't get a reputation like Charlie had in those early years by being a choir boy. But you've got to bear in mind it was the post-war years when he started to come into prominence. You've got to use your own imagination, you know. You don't build an empire of scrap metal yards like Charlie did, you know, without throwing a nice few right-handers here and there, because that's the people you're dealing with. It's mostly illegal entrepreneurs that are bringing the stuff in, there's them trying to rip him off, so you had to be tough.
They ruled their empire with violence and fear, and subsequently the torture trial, it exemplifies how far they would go.
At the trial in 1967, the jury heard evidence of sadistic brutality rarely heard in an English court. Petty fraudster Benny Coloulston gave a chilling account of his torture. In the dock sat Charlie Richardson, the leader, his younger brother Eddie, and their notoriously violent enforcer, Frankie Fraser, already named Mad Frankie.
Francis Fraser, sir.
What did he do?
He went and brought back a pair of pliers, sir. And he put the pliers into my mouth. And he tried to grab my teeth, sir. And then he ripped the top of my gum, sir.
He cut the gum inside?
Yes, sir. Here, sir.
What else?
And then he happened to catch a couple of my teeth and crush them with the pliers, sir.
Nowadays, Frankie Fraser has become a celebrity, turning his reputation for gruesome violence into a money-making act. He jokes about gold-plated pliers and his nickname, the Dentist.
When you were out of prisons on those rare moments, you did terrible things to some people.
In your world, and the viewers' world, yes, I suppose I did, but not in our world. Because the people were mostly people like me, rascals.
The blood was just dripping down my face.
The torture trial revealed a brutality that was unacceptable in any world. When confronted, Fraser dismisses the evidence.
You tried to pull out his teeth and pulled out his gums?
That's what he says, but not true, none of it. I wished it had been.
Today, Richardson and Fraser are still bound by the secrets of their criminal past. They have done things no sane person will admit to. Charlie Richardson, now 67, will only talk to a movie company prepared to make a financially rewarding, sanitized story of his life. This film gives a voice to people forgotten when violence is glamorized, those broken by brutality. We've found a witness to the torture and have identified 2 men involved in killings on the orders of Charlie Richardson. And for the first time, Benny Coloulston, the man Fraser attacked with pliers, has agreed to speak publicly. Even now, 34 years later, he fears being recognized.
Oh, my face was out here, and I was in such a state that I didn't care, really. I didn't care where I lived or died, because I was really, really Really, really hurt. I was really in pain.
Coloulston said the torture began when he was knocked almost unconscious in the street and taken to Charlie Richardson's office. On the desk was a Luger pistol.
I asked him what I was here for, and then I was struck with an iron bar across the eye, sir.
Utter rubbish. Utter. He had untold convictions, the guy.
Did you hit him on the head with a metal object?
I only wished I had have. No, I didn't, no.
And then I was ordered to be stripped, you know. Took all my clothes off. Everything was took off.
He'd said to me, I took £600 off of 2 of his men in the shop.
Richardson accused Coloulston of defrauding a member of the gang out of £600.
One hit me with a right across the face with a log of wood. Then I got another crack across the head with a log of wood. They hit me with everything.
Metal?
Yeah, everything.
Coloulston told the court Eddie Richardson had a go.
He just got this lump of wood and went right across my toes with it. But then the pain was just gone, like, if you get what I mean, like, the pain was gone. It, you know, I couldn't feel no more pain. Personally, I thought I was dead anyway.
The outcome of the 8-week trial was always uncertain. Charlie Richardson was a master at fixing juries. The police were ready. 170 police officers watched the jury 24 hours a day. Yet still, direct attempts were made to threaten or bribe 2 jurors and 2 witnesses. One of those was Coloulston. Armed detectives guarded him for 5 months to ensure he gave evidence.
I could not see because there was too much blood running down my face and my eyes.
He said, take him outside and dip him in that bath. Really cold water, and just chucked me in it. Then all of a sudden he pushed me under it and all the blood was in it, like.
To this day, Coloulston cannot forget the man who orchestrated his torture.
He just didn't care. He was laughing.
Richardson?
Yeah.
Charlie Richardson?
Charlie, yeah. He was a madman.
He was just laughing?
He was just laughing. I don't like to say it like on television, but I think he was just a bit of a maniac. Like I think he liked seeing people naked, being tortured. He wasn't a man, he was an animal.
Eddie was now working with Charlie, and their tough guy reputations were spreading.
The thing with Eddie, you know, it's a load of close pals of his that we're mutually acquainted with. So, you know, the guy was a real hard case. You know, he was a genuine tough guy. By that, I mean, he didn't have to act it, he was one. And with him, you know, a bare-knuckle fight, 9 times out of 10, he'd win.
Reformed villain Bobby Cummins served time in prison with Charlie Richardson and got to know him well. Bobby has turned his life around completely. He now works closely with the government and runs a charity for ex-offenders called Unlock.
It was a very brutal time. Men was coming back from the war, shell-shocked. There was the shortage of goods. And so racketeering was a normal way of life. And when you come from South London, North London or what, you know, you do what you've got to do to survive. Charlie was a businessman. If Charlie had been brought up in a different time, in a different family, Charlie Richardson would have probably been one of your top businessmen, because he was about money.
Charlie's success gave him the stability to settle down, and in 1955 he married, later having 5 children. Eddie too tied the knot in 1956. But soon, disaster struck the family. The youngest Richardson brother, Alan, sadly died in a boating accident on the Thames.
And your other brother?
Alan, I lost him. Going through on the Thames, going through a tunnel, a boat got in front of us, a big boat, it caused the waves, hit the bridge and turned the boat over. We're both in the water, aren't we? Ruined me. In prison, I used to think about him every night. You know, lovely kid, a lovely, lovely brother.
And he was in business with you, wasn't he?
Oh yeah, I let him at that warehouse in Edington Square.
Yeah.
And the day I took him out, he earned 300 or 400 quid that day. I was really proud of him, you know what I mean?
Sad, isn't it?
Yeah, it's tragic.
The family tragedy left just two brothers, Charlie and Eddie. But as the 60s approached, they were entering their infamous glory days.
I'm Fred Dinage, and for the first time on television, I'm telling the true story of the infamous 1960s South London gangsters, the Richardson brothers. I'm meeting Charlie Richardson and his associates face to face. He's kept well away from TV cameras until now, but his revelations could well change crime history forever.
By the early 60s, Charlie and Eddie Richardson were only in their 20s, but together they were running a successful scrap metal empire with other growing businesses.
You ran South London?
I never really. I've just run my own business there. I suppose I had about 6 or 7 shops, good shops, and we had warehouses, 3 or 4 warehouses, and I had a lot of 5 or 6 good scrap yards.
Charlie was the man to go to in South London. The old bill, right? I think they were on, what, 15 quid a week or something in them days. Most of them were bent, right? They would nick a certain face. Before I nick you, go and see Charlie's, right? You're in trouble. Tell him you're in trouble, tell you who's nicked you. Charlie used to brokerage the deals to get guys out of jail by paying off the old bill. He was the man to go to.
On the other side of the river, the Kray twins were developing their own reputation for business. Chris Lambrianou was a loyal member of the Craze firm. He even served 14 years for helping to cover up Reggie Kray's brutal stabbing and murder of Jack the Hat McVitie. Chris knows only too well the reality of Gangland London in the 60s and the consequences the way of life had on those involved.
Gangland life was a conglomeration of different firms, coming from different angles, doing different things. Long firm, protection money, nightclubs, gambling, bank robbery, post office robbery. They were all specialists in their field. Every firm had a character. And in them days, you'd meet up at lunchtime in a pub and firms would cross each other. Well, we've got a bit of work here, we need your man here, or we need that guy here. And so firms were interchanging all the time.
The place to be seen for any firm was the Astor Club in Mayfair's Berkeley Square.
You'd be in there, there'd be a firm there, another firm there, another firm there. All well-capable people. On the other hand, you had Orson Welles sat there with a couple of his boyfriends. You got like Nobby Stiles and Georgie Best there. Everybody mingled. And interestingly enough, the first person to ever get a membership at the Astor was Charlie Richardson. He went in, everybody followed.
Even now, Charlie Richardson has pulling power outside of the criminal world and in the world of celebrity. That is demonstrated by the man I'm going to meet now, Stephen Burkoff, Hollywood actor, prolific playwright and author, and good friend of Charlie's.
If you come from the working classes, as I have, you cannot help but have an association with villains. You're a child, a teenager, and you hear about these young men getting into trouble and doing incredible capers. And they become, in a way, heroes. Not because you admire thievery and killing and brutality, but you admired the sense that these people were kicking against authority.
People from our neck of the woods aspired to be like them. So, if you like, they were powerful, they were very powerful. If they labelled you a rat or a wrong, you weren't going nowhere. So if they wanted to do you damage, they didn't have to pull pliers and electrodes out on you. Their word was enough to finish your criminal career.
That these people were physically brave. There was something a bit noble about them. We tended to cherish and value people of courage. In fact, they were villains. Well, who gives a monkey's toss? More villains were in Parliament.
A particular speciality for business-minded Charlie was the long firm fraud operations.
Well, the long firm was brilliant. You'd set up an office somewhere, you get somebody to front it, you get them a bank account, and then you start ordering quantities of stuff. And start off with, you'd be paying all the time. When your credit rating was really, really running high and good, that's when you'd order in the lot, you know, tremendous amount of stuff. And then you would just set it on for a little very money, shut the office up, and nobody knows you've been there. That was the long firm. They made hundreds of thousands, if not more, out of that game. But that was Charlie's brain.
The Richardsons were making serious money, and the London underworld knew it. Estimates at one point put the turnover at £1.5 million a year. But this drew jealousy from other quarters, especially East End gangsters, the Craze.
What about the Kray twins? How did you get on with them?
All right, that was all right. I'll never see a lot of them.
Was the rivalry?
Not really, no, because they wasn't into what I was into. You know, they was all good boys, but I was, you know, we was so far ahead of them, you understand?
I think to start off with, it was only real in the twins' head. And I was having this conversation with Ronnie one day, and he'd open up now and again, and I said, what really give you the arse-ache with the Richardsons? Very quiet, he said, jealous of the money. They had pots of money, and we just have to go out every night and earn some more. And in the next breath, he says, I'll tell you something. He said, I tried to put us all together, right, you know, like Joe Pyle, the Nashes, Ginger Dennis, all different firms all over London. He said that we'd all be one because the Yanks were coming in, you know. If we're all together, we can all help each other and we can all learn together. He said, and I had a meeting. He said, and I put it to them. He said, and they just laughed in my face, you know. Yes, I said, who was that? You know, Charlie. He said, you know, I want to wish you well. Your business is your business. My business is my business. But that don't include us. We don't need it.
As the Richardson empire grew, the brothers started to go their separate ways. Eddie went into business with experienced villain Frankie Fraser. Their main focus was on a fruit machine enterprise in the West End clubs.
Was protection ever involved in this?
Yes, of course. Because if you had your machines in a club, the club owner could then tell people, no, watch your step with the machines. They're not mine, they belong to Eddie and Frank, etc. And that's how it all happened.
At your peak, how many machines did you have? How many clubs?
All over the country.
Did you?
We're talking about 200 or 300, say, more. Yeah.
What sort of money were you making?
Making very good money, yeah.
But nonetheless, your brother, Eddie, and Frankie Fraser did have a lot of interest.
They was there with the fruit machines, getting in, upsetting people, making them take their machines out and putting their machines in, but nothing to do with me, Fred.
So you never had any of that interest?
Nothing, I wasn't interested in fruit machines. I was getting a good living anyway.
Frankie Fraser already had a dangerous reputation, and now, aligned with tough man Eddie, they were feared by many.
Eddie and Frank together were a lethal combination. You didn't mess about with them kind of people. They had the West End sewn up. I like Frank an awful lot because I spent time with him in prison. And if I will say one thing, he was loyal to the men in prison. He would die for them. But on the other hand, out on the street, Frank was just, you know, doing what Frank did. Terrified. Even today, he'll tell you he's not, you know, his beloved axe or his, you know, whatever he was using, his tool of choice, as it were. Eddie knew how far to push it, so did Frank.
The Craze were in the gangster business for glamour and reputation. Charlie Richardson was in it for money.
Charlie Richardson, I think, is a very intelligent man, clever man. Shrewd, acute, astute.
Intelligent, well-read, very well-read, convivial, good company, and can be a gentleman. On the other side, brutal. All of a sudden, he could just turn.
Unlike the Craze, he was a clever, if ruthless, businessman. with assets of about £1 million, much amassed through his criminal empire. Yet he was born in 1934 with few advantages in life. His mother worked in a tea house. His father was often away in prison or chasing women. These were hard years, and Hitler's bombs made life harder in Camberwell, South London, where Charlie was brought up. Charlie was a habitual truant. He formed a young gang with his friends, battled other gangs, taunted local bobbies, and scavenged on bomb sites.
Me and Charlie was very good pals, and we used to go out looking for bits of bomb with our tin hats on. We was only 8, 9 years old, you know. And that's when I first met Charlie.
Life was different in the war. Completely new world. Rations, clothing coupons, petrol coupons. Oh, it was a paradise for a thief. Absolutely. I'll never forgive Hitler for surrendering. It was wonderful. You could steal anything, and people bit your hand off to buy it off you.
Days of wartime austerity were replaced by a craving for consumer goods. Charlie Richardson nicked goods off lorries, stripped lead off roofs, and became an expert at stealing cars.
I behaved very badly. Eventually, when I was 14 years of age, I was in trouble with stealing a car and stopping away from school, truanted, and I was placed in an approved school for naughty boys.
2 years with other thieves and embryonic gangsters hardened the young Richardson. Working out at the Lynn Boxing Club with his younger brother Eddie prepared Charlie to take on anyone.
Charlie was a fighter. And he proved himself with his fists and everything. I mean, he terrorised people, there's no mistake about it. Everyone was terrified of him.
He now proved himself in business. He started in scrap metal, and by the age of 22 owned 6 scrapyards in South London with a turnover of £250,000. He didn't care where the metal came from.
He'd buy anything, Charlie, obviously, anybody would, you know. But,
Didn't matter if it was stolen?
Of course not, no. No. You know, and the police never used to worry. They never used to rage you then, did they? You'd get the old Bobby on the beat, come in and look around and get 5 bob and go away. That's the end of it.
Richardson learned it wasn't just bobbies on the beat who could be bribed. When just 18, he bought 2 planes for scrap, but defrauded a business partner out of thousands of pounds. 2 fraud detectives visited his scrapyard.
And Charlie said, "Now, what do you want?" So they said, "Well, we want a nice holiday for our wives and ourselves," and I think it was about £300 each. And they was off your back, you know, no more troubles.
If we didn't pay these people money, my customers had all kind of harassment. My premises were searched. And I mean, it's a strong form of blackmail and it had to be paid. Everybody else paid the police off, every other metal merchant. If I didn't pay them off, I'd have been in a very vulnerable position.
How much would you pay off in a year altogether, roughly?
I've never really thought about it, really, but I suppose it went into thousands of pounds.
Thousands of pounds?
Yes, I would say so. To everybody, really. People who finished up right at the top of the scale, commanders at Scotland Yard.
I mean, we got arrested, but we were released the next day. Or the same day, to come to that. Oh, yeah, powerful friends, Charlie did.
With policemen in his pocket, Richardson expanded his criminal empire. His victims had nowhere to go. One villain, called Mickey Roth, who upset Richardson, felt the force of his anger.
He said, "What? Let's go round and get hold of him." Went round, got hold of Mickey Roth, bashed up Dookie Lynch, chucked him out a window, bashed up Golly Lands, chased Mickey Roth in a car, shot at Mickey Roth, right, put bullet holes in his brother's car, Danny Roth.
The more the Richardsons believed they were untouchable, the more violent they became. By the end of the 50s, the Richardsons' tentacles spread across South London. They had pubs and clubs and money coming in from protection. Anyone causing trouble on their patch was dealt with. But they dreamt of being so feared, no one would even challenge them. The man they needed was Frankie Fraser, Gangland's most feared enforcer. They saw an opportunity. While Fraser was in prison, one of his relatives was beaten up by another South London gang.
Well, wasn't that wonderful what they done? Eddie and Charlie, they found out who they were and knocked them about, which was wonderful. A lovely gesture. And that's why I went in with them.
Why did Charlie want Frankie Fraser in his firm?
Well, Frank is a legend, actually, isn't he? I mean, everybody knew Frank. And if Frank was on the firm, people left you alone.
Fraser. Dangerous little bastard, yeah. Oh, yeah, he'd kill you. Cut you to pieces.
He led a gang that slashed and bludgeoned Jack Spot, former king of the underworld.
You had a fearsome reputation.
Yes, I did.
And Charlie Richardson asked you to join them.
He did, yes.
They knew you were a man who showed gratitude, showed
Yes.
respect.
Yeah, very much.
You'd be there to help them.
All the way. Whatever.
Right-hand man.
Whatever.
And you would do whatever they asked you to do.
If that was necessary, yes.
By the early 60s, Charlie Richardson had gathered together an unrivaled team of hard men.
Eddie Richardson always struck me as being an animal. There's no finesse about him at all. He was just an animal.
He had some people on the firm, yeah.
George Cornell, who was known for his
George, George was all right. He was, he just used to take too many pills, didn't he, George?
But he had a reputation for violence.
Oh, yeah, George, yeah, a reputation, yeah.
Jimmy Moody?
Jimmy Moody.
What was Jimmy Moody like?
He was all right, just bad man, that's all. Not a bad man in himself. You couldn't cross him, you couldn't.
What happened if you crossed him?
Something very nasty. I knew Jim very well.
He had Fraser, he was a thug. He had Clark, another thug. Charlie mastered them. He was the number one. He was the area commander, if you like.
Across the Thames on the east side, the Kray twins, who dreamt of becoming a criminal family to compare with Al Capone, watched the rise of the Richardsons with apprehension.
The Craze would never had two bob. They never really earned a lot of money. It would only be like sort of 300 quid a week out of that club or 200 quid a week out of that club. There wasn't businessmen at all. They just wanted their name in the paper and glory and be seen with like this star or that star. The Richardsons was 10 times far more successful.
At the fashionable Astor Club, where gangsters were as welcome as celebrities and nobility, the two gangs would come face to face.
We had enjoyable times there. All the girls knew us down there. Until Georgie Cornell, he used to go down there and bump into Ronnie Kray and call him a fucking puss. And then they wanted to start fighting each other. But Reggie usually pulled Ronnie off and Charlie usually pulled, Georgie Cornell off for Eddie.
With Eddie and Frankie making money from businesses across the country, Charlie decided to expand his interests abroad. In 1964, he moved to South Africa to pursue his passion for mining, a natural progression from scrap metals.
This guy could be an incredible geological engineer. He has the brain, but because he was brought up in a certain way, didn't have the proper education, didn't have opportunities, and they went into scrap iron, but he knows about metals. He knows more about metals than most metallurgists.
By 1965, the Richardsons were at their peak. Charlie's international mining business was growing, and Eddie had the West End sewn up.
Would you say at your peak you felt invincible?
Yeah, really, yeah, I suppose I did, because I wasn't really doing anything wrong, you understand? And if I was, I covered it all properly, you know.
So you felt strong?
Yeah, I never murdered anybody, never shot anybody, because it was against my beliefs, murdering somebody. You understand, really, Fred? I know it sounds silly, but it's true.
But it was a fatal shooting that would bring about the Richardsons' demise. I'm Fred Dinage, and this is the story of the Richardson brothers, Charlie and Eddie. Now Charlie, who was dubbed the torture boss, is revealing everything to me for the first time on television. It's 1965. Eddie, together with Frankie Fraser, was running a fruit machine business and had developed a tough reputation. 10,000 miles away, Charlie got to know the South African secret society, the Broederband. A member asked him to tap the British Prime Minister Harold Wilson's phone. Charlie was perfectly placed to do this with a cleaning company he owned that was employed at number 10.
Did you tap the Prime Minister's phone?
Yeah, somebody done it, yeah. MI5 went mad. I never realised what I was doing, really. I just wanted to get it out and get away and get on with the mining.
Meanwhile, back in the UK, trouble was brewing for Eddie and Frankie Fraser with rival firms. This resulted in a violent clash in the Mr. Smith's nightclub in Catford. The night of the 7th of March 1966 has now become part of Gangland legend.
They had kicked off there with two firms, and nobody knew exactly who it was at the time. And then it came up with the Richardsons were involved. I knew Charlie wasn't involved because I knew Charlie was in South Africa, but it could only be Eddie, and it could only be Frank.
Frank Fraser.
Frank Fraser. And I know Frank got shot in the leg, and I know Eddie got shot somewhere as well. But there was Hart who got shot. That was from the other firm. And this had been some rivalry that had been going on, something to do with protection. It was a kind of a whole thing that had gone and finally kicked off in this Mr. Smith's.
Frankie Fraser was at the centre of the action.
Just so happened another little gang was in there, and they were looking for trouble, and they sort of went for us, and naturally that was their mistake. We went for them then.
And were you guilty?
Well, I got caught.
And who got killed there?
Only another guy like myself. I was lucky, I got injured and won the fight. He was unlucky, he lost.
How did he get killed? Was he shot?
A bit of everything.
Was it?
Hammer, knife.
Both Eddie Richardson and Frankie Fraser had been injured, and rival Dickie Hart shot dead. Police suspected Frankie Fraser of pulling the trigger, but struggled to find the evidence to prove it. The next night, Richardson associate George Cornell was shot by Ronnie Kray in the Blind Beggar pub. The media suggested this was a revenge killing.
And this is from Ronnie's lips to me. Ronnie was legless drunk. He goes to this little spieler card game place with a boyfriend. Little loudish or whatever. George Cornell kicks 7 bells out of Ronnie. He gave Ronnie K a beating like you can't believe. In normal circumstances, you would think that the next day there'd be repercussions. But Reg said to Ronnie, hold up there, we've got interest here, we've got interest there. There'll be a time, there'll be a place. But as Ronnie told me, right, when he heard that Cornell was at the beggar, it was nothing to do with this revenge Richardson thing. It was his chance to kill him.
In South Africa, Charlie heard news of Eddie's predicament and decided to return to the UK, a decision he would ultimately regret. One person who'll be able to tell me why is Ronnie Richardson.
She and Charlie have been together for 24 years, and she knows him better than anyone. She is a highly intelligent businesswoman and nothing at all like the gangster's wife that you might expect.
Was it a mistake to come back and help his brother, do you think?
I think from Charlie's point of view, definitely, but it's his brother. He loved him. You know, I mean, despite any indifferences that they might have, he loved him, and he would have done anything to help him. He'd already lost his young brother. You know, that broke his heart. He didn't want anything serious to happen to Eddie.
Well, I was out of the country. When I flew back from South Africa, I see a notice board up, like a newspaper stand, about a shooting at Catford. And like the Sixth Sense come in again, I had an intuition it was something to do with Eddie. Get indoors, ring up, it was him, he was in hospital. Got shot in the arse or something. Big shootout of Mr. Smith's.
Was he cross afterwards, Charlie, that you'd got into all that bother?
It was really, yeah, he didn't want to see us get into trouble over such a silly little thing, you know, a fight in a club sort of style. It's a great night.
Great night?
On the 28th of June 1966, Eddie and Frankie Fraser went on trial for the Mr. Smith's shootout. Charlie remained in the UK to help his brother.
You spoke to the witnesses?
Yeah, well, we had the witnesses in Smith's Club. Oh yeah, I got them all right. That was all right. They said what I wanted them to say.
But you shouldn't have done that, should you?
I know, but now I would never do it now. Get out, get away, wouldn't you? I can't leave them. They've got to see me up Brixton, visiting them.
Just for your brother?
For my brother, yeah, because I love my brother.
The Mr. Smith's trial collapsed and a retrial was ordered. The police were determined to break the power base that Charlie and Eddie had built. With so many of them met on the brothers' payroll, a policeman was brought in from the outside to lead the investigation. Gerald MacArthur, the Assistant Chief Constable of Hertfordshire. On the 30th of July 1966, World Cup final day, Charlie was arrested during a dawn raid, along with a number of his associates.
Tell me about the day they came for you.
Well, early in the morning, like, you know, at 5 or 6 in the morning, all the top coppers there, all my kids up, my wife, you know. I made a cup of tea, cleaned my teeth, and away I went with them for 18 years.
On the 4th of April 1967, the trial began. Charlie, Eddie and Frankie all facing serious charges. The press dubbed it the torture trial.
You know, it sells newspapers. If they said, like, Charlie Richardson bashed the guy up, you'd get a column that big in the newspaper. Torture? Oh, yeah, front page stuff, and we're going to run with this for weeks, and we're going to have a trial, and it makes the police look good. We've captured this notorious gang.
Having experienced it myself during the Kray trial, going to court and the celebrities coming up and sitting there opposite the jury, listening to everything, because there was drama there.
The charges included electric shock treatment, men bound and gagged, beatings with a lump of iron, teeth pulled out with pliers, and mock trials, all called torture by the press.
You know, the bit that made that trial worse is when one of them says, "Fraser pulled out my tooth," you know. He never pulled anybody's teeth out. I don't think he knew what a pair of pliers were, Frank. He knew what a hatchet was. You know, he planted that in Eric Mason's head.
There was all these stories about you and torture and pliers, teeth being pulled out, electric shocks.
When I was doing that 20 years, wouldn't I have loved it if I could have been in my cell going, "Oh, what a good job you made of that back molar." It wasn't true, though, unfortunately.
What about all the stories, though, of torture and pliers?
It's all mythology by newspapers. They've even got a black box in the museum in Scotland Yard, electric box, what they said it was ours. Nothing to do with us at all. They went and bought it and produced it at the trial and said it was a box like this.
But did they use it?
No, nobody used it. Never had to. These people, Fred, you know, they'd sell you everything, sell you their mother.
So you can look me, Charlie, in the eye and say, hand on heart, I never tortured anybody.
Never tortured anybody. I never done it anyway. I never said I'd done it. I said I told other people to do it.
And did you?
No, not at all. No need for it, Fred. Why? I want to get my money back, that's all.
There's an inconsistency between what Charlie says and the charges he was facing. The prosecution produced a string of witnesses, mostly former associates, testifying to gruesome acts of torture and violence.
One incident at the Astor reminded the Craze just how dangerous the Richardson men were. In 1964, their right-hand man, Frankie Fraser, had an argument with another villain called Eric Mason. Mason, according to Fraser, threatened to seek the help of the Craze.
I kidnapped him, slung him in, took him to our workplace and done him with an axe. And slung him outside an hospital with the axe in his head.
When he saw the axe coming, he tried to put his hands on it. He put his hands on his head.
And it went right through his fingers into his head, yeah. Lovely axe.
You could have killed him.
I could have killed him, yes.
But Charlie Richardson did not want to go to war with the Craze. His ambition was to be a multimillionaire, not the #1 gangster. To achieve this, he turned increasingly to fraud. He set up phony companies to sell goods he'd not paid for. The companies collapsed, and the goods were sold before manufacturers and the fraud squad arrived.
They was doing it quite a lot, yeah.
What sort of goods?
Fancy goods, anything. Booze, clothes.
Radios, transistors, you name it, irons, scales, you name it. If the firm would supply it, he's in business with them.
Would Charlie Richardson, would he be on the company documents? Would his name appear?
Oh, no. Oh, no.
Charlie was taking the biggest cut, but we all had plenty to live on and nice cars, you know, new cars and that.
Charlie Richardson would later justify his greed in romantic terms.
It's sort of Robin Hood. The rich got robbed, poor got bargain goods, we got rich.
To pull off these frauds, Charlie Richardson needed bright, articulate criminals.
You know, we all come from Camberwell and got our H's and things like that. And that's why Charlie needed the comment to start the companies up.
Richardson enticed into his web characters like Frank Fraser to invent some of the most spectacular frauds of that era. But Fraser would only work as a consultant. He would not front any of the frauds. The man Richardson really wanted to employ was Jack Duval, one of the top con men.
Well, take Jack Duval. He had a front like no one's business. You know, he could go anywhere. And he could literally con you out of millions.
He had no compunctions whatsoever of ripping somebody off, you see.
Jack Duval used to spend £5,000 a night at the Astor Club and didn't even miss it. It wasn't his money anyway.
Richardson persuaded this astute con man to work with him. But Richardson was so driven by greed, he assumed all his team of villains and con men were stealing from him, especially Jack Duval. Later he wrote,
Loyalty became absolutely essential to me. I was working in a world where theft was part of the game. I wanted people who was willing to give their undying loyalty to somebody they could look up to.
Anyone who got caught doing something wrong was usually put on trial. We used to have these mock trials. They even had robes people got for us from the Old Bailey, full trappings. I was defence a couple of times. I don't think I ever won a case. Eddie won every case, you know. Well, Eddie was the prosecutor, Charlie was the bloody judge, so what chance do you have anyway? There was more humour in it than anything. It was more or less to terrify the people who was up against Charlie and teach them a lesson at the same time. And I took part in 2 of them. They both given good idings, and then And we started the torture business then, you know, the proper torture business.
When Richardson feared Duval was spending his cash, he dispensed with the trial and declared him guilty.
Charlie gave him such a fucking smack, knocked him clean home and says, how can you turn us over, Jack, you know, and what we've done for you and all that. Jack was crying and smothered in blood. Charlie started kicking him. And then I think Mad Frankie Fraser gave him a smack as well.
The torture trial in 1967 heard Duval got his revenge by stealing £1,500 from Richardson before fleeing abroad. Richardson then tortured two of Duval's friends to find where the conman was hiding. The first was Lucian Harris. He said he was threatened, beaten, and that after a meal break, Charlie Richardson thrust his thumbs deep into his eyes. Harris said a portable hand electric generator was then brought in, and the leads were attached to his big toes.
Well, he turned the handle of the generator, sir. Well, I felt a shock. I felt myself jump up and I landed on the floor.
Harris said the torture was repeated, time and time again, for an hour.
To what parts of your body?
First to the calves of each leg, then to the thighs, to the anus, to the penis, to the chest, across the nose, and across the temples.
Bunny Bridges, another of Duval's friends, suffered identical torture.
Charlie said, Johnny, Roy, take him upstairs and put him on the torture box. Make him fucking talk. So we stripped him cold cut and sat him in the bath of water, then put this electric thing on him. And you put that, connect that to a bloke's private part, and he springs that eye out the water. And he fucking screamed like a pig. And we kept saying, tell us where he is, Bunny, and we stopped. And he kept saying he doesn't know, he doesn't know, he doesn't know, which he didn't know.
Charlie Richardson used torture as a business tool to impose discipline and fear across the criminal underworld. Employees running a lucrative car park scam at Heathrow Airport were touched by this fear. In 1965, car park staff were making £100,000 a year by fiddling dates and times on parking tickets. A huge sum when their wages were about £750 a year. Frankie Fraser and the Richardsons persuaded them to hand over £500 every week. Frank Prater witnessed how one key employee was persuaded.
Fraser was there. I know him. And all of a sudden, they bring this guy in from the sort of underneath the other part of the cellar. A cell, if you like. Charlie's the judge now, you see. And he says, right, strip off. And the guy stripped down, took all his clothes. These others two were there. They had wet towels. So I've got an idea what might happen. I've to think it's going to happen to me. They give him a couple of slaps with these towels, frightened him. There was a sheer frightening effect on him, and not so far short of that on me. He told them the whole story, who did it, who didn't do it, what they did and how they did it, and there's Charlie sitting there listening to it all.
You didn't persuade them to give some of the money to Charlie Richardson?
No, but no.
You didn't strip one of the men naked?
No, I wasn't charged with it.
You
ever?
You didn't beat any of them?
No, wasn't charged. There's your answer.
The police decided the man who had been beaten was too traumatized to give evidence in court. For a time, the torture sessions worked. Criminals lived in fear. Even the Craze were wary. On the other side of the river, even the Kray gang was shaken by the torture stories they heard.
They were torture merchants, you know. They used electrical generators and shit like that.
Did you hear about the torture before it got into the newspapers?
Oh, yeah. They heard about our beatings and cuttings and shootings, but at least ours was fast and clean, as opposed to being long drawn out, you know? Pinochet shit, you know what I mean? Ours was more Clint Eastwood.
For some years, there was an uneasy truce between the Craze in East London and the Richardsons in South London. That truce was shattered in the West End.
And then the gambling started, one-armed bandits. That's when all the trouble started, because the Craze were putting them one-armed bandits in some of their clubs. Eddie Richardson and Mad Frankie was pulling them out and putting their own in. And that started all the friction with the two gangs. They were both competing for the same market in the West End of London. The Richardsons and the Craze. Extortion, one-armed bandits, gambling. Oh, you name it, they was doing it.
Frankie Fraser ran the slot machine business with Eddie Richardson. The more successful they became, the more the Craze envied them.
Rumour had it about Eddie and Frank, but I never heard any rumours about Charlie. Charlie wasn't a player in the West End. He didn't want to be a heavyweight villain or anything else like that. Charlie, in his mind, I think, was looking for a pot of gold.
But Charlie's pot of gold was now out of reach, and the brothers' prospects were looking bleak.
I'm Fred Dinage, and in this documentary I've been given exclusive access to one of the most notorious gangs in British criminal history. This is the true story of the Richardson Gang.
By April 1967, Charlie Richardson, Eddie Richardson and Frankie Fraser were on trial facing serious accusations labelled torture.
Well, you've got to remember, Charlie and Eddie had hardly ever been in, well, Eddie had hardly ever been in trouble in his life. And Charlie, I think, had only been to prison once, about 6 months. So really, they knew nothing about courts or anything. And they used to ask me how it was going. And I just had to tell them the truth. It looks very bad.
And bad it was. For Charlie, Eddie and Frankie, a guilty verdict was given. Frankie Fraser got 10 years for 2 counts of GBH and demanding money with menaces. Eddie Richardson received 10 years for 1 count of GBH and 2 counts of ABH, plus another 5 years for his involvement in the Mr. Smith shootout. Charlie Richardson was convicted of 4 counts of GBH, 2 of ABH, 1 of robbery with violence, and 2 charges of demanding money with menaces. He was sentenced to 25 years in prison.
How did you feel when you...
Well, I said, thanks very much indeed. Well, what else could I say? Nothing, could you?
He definitely didn't warrant the sort of sentence that he got. Whether he would have warranted a couple of years, maybe, for being a little bit naughty, yeah.
Both Charlie and Eddie were initially sent to Durham prison.
Charlie was labelled Category A and placed in a maximum security wing. He was deemed to be a threat to national security, to fellow inmates and to the public, and was regularly moved from prison to prison to prevent him from escaping.
I was on a 24-hour watch, light on in the cell. I was on a special watch for about 13, 14 years.
How did you cope with that?
I don't know. I was strong-minded, that's all. But, you know, I had a big family. I didn't want to let my family down, my kids.
When he first went in, Frank would say, oh, you know, fight them all the way, fight them, beat them all. And he did. And then he just sat back one day and he said, you know what, this is ridiculous. You know, I'm just not going to carry on like this. I'm going to beat them the best way I know how. And that was to educate himself, and that's what he did.
What got you through? Was it reading? Was it belief? Was it...
I studied, didn't I? I done university, done A-levels, O-levels. And I'm not an academic person, really, but I had to do it for my letter writing to my kids and everybody.
He was a highly intelligent man, but he was also well-read, so he was a very interesting man. And when you're in there for that length of time, you get fed up with hearing about the crimes we've committed and who's done what. And to have someone talking about totally different things like Africa and Open University, and Charlie would talk about philosophy, psychology, you name it. I mean, he'd read it.
Charlie'd leave a book on my bed as he was passing my cell. I'd read it and think, Charlie Richardson read that book? It moved me to tears. You can imagine a man sitting in prison, it's the loneliest place in the world. 15 years, you look in the head, there's nothing. But the man told me if I threw my head over the wall, my body would follow. And it did.
Charlie's younger brother, Eddie, was released from Pentonville Prison in August 1976, having served 10 years. Charlie, on the other hand, was still serving a much longer sentence.
The only time he really, as he said, he cracked, I think, was in about 81, and he needed to get away, and he absconded then, just to get his sanity back, really.
They put me in open prison. I got from there for about 6 months. Went to Paris and everywhere, you know, and enjoyed myself. Went to Spain. I had to do it because you can only do so much, Bird, to crack your brain in.
Got on a plane and off he went and had the life of Riley. And then when he thought, well, I've had enough, I better go back and sort it out, came back himself. You know, you've got to give that guy 100 out of 100.
Charlie was released on the 24th of August 1984 after serving 18 years of his 25-year sentence. It wasn't long before he met Ronnie, who became a partner in life and business.
He's scared to death of her. Scared to death of her. She is an absolutely lovely, lovely lady. He loves her most dearly. She the same with him, but she keeps him under control.
You see, everybody I talk to about you and Charlie says that you are very much the power behind the throne, and
I'm glad they didn't say that in the 60s. They'd have given me 25 with him. I don't know. I think I'm probably the stabling influence behind the relationship because, as I said, he's a naughty little boy, and you have to, you know, remind him to stay, you know, on the straight and narrow.
Unlike his brother, Eddie refused to keep his nose clean and developed a new form of criminal activity, drug smuggling in conjunction with a cartel from Colombia. He was arrested several times during the Christmas period of 1988 and eventually charged with drugs importation and sentenced to 25 years in prison. He was released in 2001, having served 12 years.
Charlie and Eddie no longer speak. Throughout their older years, the once close brothers have gone their separate ways.
And since you came out of prison, have you been 100% straight?
I have really, yeah, because I thought, oh, why shouldn't I do it straight? I'm not a fool. You know, I've got as much brain as anybody else, so I understand how it all works. Why don't I do it properly? And that's what we've done. I mean, I tried a few crooked things when I first came out. I had to get myself moving a bit. But I soon realised I've got to chop it out and do it properly.
Frankie's been back in prison, Eddie's been back in prison.
Yeah.
Charlie never has.
No.
Has he gone straight in all that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, he has his own businesses, you know.
Is it fair to ask you, or reasonable to ask you and say if it's not the sort of businesses that you are both in at the moment?
Yes, well, it's all very legitimate. We're involved in mining, which has been Charlie's passion for most of his life.
Even though it's 45 years since the torture trial, the Richardsons' tough reputation remains. But is it deserved?
He had the ability to frighten people. He's an old man now. Does he still?
Oh, he can still make you feel your pants, Fred. He could still make you feel your pants. Old, maybe. Not well, yep. But is he capable? Oh, most definitely.
In all my time in prison, I never see Charlie ever threaten anybody. He didn't need to. He was well-versed, well-read, very, very affable man. I mean, one time I said, Charlie, what are you talking to that man? He was a tramp. And he said, Chris, everybody's got a story. Another time he said to me, Chris, he said, I cried for a man with no shoes until I met a man with no feet. That was Charlie Richardson.
I mean, it would be much more interesting if I sat here and told you, yes, the black box was true, and yes, he tortured people, and yes, he was this, and it would be far more interesting because human nature seems to like that. But I'm sorry to disappoint them.
When you look back, Charlie, regrets?
Oh, yeah, I'd do it differently, because I would. I'd be loyal to my family, my kids, and forget about anybody else. Like Eddie, people like that, they don't fight their own battles. I don't know how to say that, but I think I would, you know what I mean? You know, if I could, and look after my family.
I don't think we will ever know the full truth over the torture gang reputation. What I do know is that Charlie and his associates are the last of a generation. In their day, they played by their own rules and paid the price. Now, with their age comes wisdom, and at times in our conversations they have expressed regret. One thing I am sure of is this: we will never see gangsters like them again.